I had not seen my father smile for many years. Sometimes, when I tried to remember it, the picture in my mind felt far away and a little blurred, like a photograph that had been left in the sun too long. I remembered a younger version of him. His eyes would shine. His teeth would show. His whole face would change. It was not just a small smile. It was the kind that could make a room feel brighter, the kind that could make me forget my troubles for a moment. But over time, that smile disappeared. Life, with all its heavy weight, seemed to take it away from him. He worked too much. He worried too much. And little by little, his laughter became quiet. His lips stayed straight, his eyes tired. It hurt me to watch it happen, but I did not know how to bring the smile back. When I was a child, his smile was like a signal. It told me everything was fine. Even if the world outside was cold or noisy, if my father smiled, I felt safe. I can still remember evenings when we sat on the porch. He would tell me stories about his own childhood, and sometimes, in the middle of a story, he would laugh. That laugh had a special sound, like music you want to hear again and again. But those evenings stopped when I grew older, when school became more serious, and when he had more responsibilities. The smile faded slowly, and I didn't notice how rare it had become until one day, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I had seen it. Years passed. I went away to study. At first, I visited home often, and even though he didn't smile like before, I could still see a small curve on his lips when he saw me arrive. But later, as my life got busier, the visits became less frequent. We spoke on the phone, but it was short. "How are you?" "I'm fine." That was all. I wanted to say more. I wanted to ask if he was happy. But the words stayed inside me, as if a wall had grown between us. That wall was not built in one day. It grew slowly, made of small silences and missed moments. Sometimes I would look at old photographs. In one, he was holding me in his arms when I was a baby. His smile in that picture was so full of life, so bright. I would stare at it and wonder, where did that smile go? Was it still somewhere inside him, waiting for the right moment to return? Or was it gone forever, lost in the shadows of life's difficulties? I didn't have the answer. And the not knowing made my chest feel heavy. I told myself it was just normal for people to smile less as they get older. But deep down, I knew that was not true for him. My father's smile had been part of who he was. Losing it felt like losing a part of him. I missed it in ways I couldn't explain to anyone else. Friends would ask about my family, and I would say, "They are fine." But inside, I wanted to say, "I wish you could have met the man my father used to be. I wish you could have seen his smile." One night, lying in bed, I tried to remember the exact last time I saw him smile. My mind searched through years of memories. Birthdays. New Year celebrations. Family dinners. I could see his face in all those moments, but in most of them, he looked serious. Sometimes he would laugh politely at someone's joke, but it was not the same. The warmth was missing. The light was missing. And I realized that I had been waiting, without even knowing it, for a day when that warmth would come back. Then came the morning that would change everything. I didn't know it yet, but it started with a sound. The sound of my phone ringing. I looked at the screen and saw my cousin's name. It was unusual for him to call early in the morning, and I felt a small twist in my stomach. I answered quickly, my voice still heavy with sleep. "Hello." He said my name softly, as if he didn't want to scare me. Then he said, "Your father wants to see you." Those words made me sit up immediately. I asked, "Is he okay?" My cousin paused for a moment before saying, "He's fine. He just wants to see you." That pause told me there was more to the story, but I didn't push. My mind was already full of images, my father sitting in his chair, waiting, maybe older and weaker than before. I didn't know what I would find, but I knew one thing, I had to go. As I hung up the phone, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor. My heart was beating faster. I thought about the years that had passed without seeing that smile. I thought about the questions I had never asked. And deep inside, I felt something like hope, and fear at the same time. Hope that I might see his smile again. Fear that I might find it gone forever. That mix of feelings stayed with me all day, and I knew I was about to begin a journey that would bring me face to face with more than just my father. It would bring me face to face with the parts of myself I had been avoiding. The moment I heard those words, "Your father wants to see you," they stayed in my mind like an echo. All day, I couldn't stop thinking about them. I walked around my small apartment, picking up my keys, putting them down, checking my phone again and again, as if I would get another call with more information. My cousin hadn't told me much, and I didn't ask. Maybe I was afraid of the answer. I thought about what my father might look like now. I imagined his hair, probably more gray. I imagined his hands, the ones I remembered as strong, maybe now slower, maybe shaking a little. I thought about his eyes, would they still have that deep, thoughtful look, or would they seem tired and far away? Most of all, I wondered about his smile. Would it appear when he saw me? Or had life taken it away for good? My feelings were like waves in the ocean, one moment calm, the next crashing with emotion. I remembered the last time we had spoken face to face. We said goodbye quickly, without a long hug. I didn't know it would be the last time for years. If I had known, maybe I would have stayed longer, looked at his face more, tried to remember every detail. Now I had a chance to see him again, and I didn't know if I was ready. But something deep inside told me I had to go, no matter what I would find when I arrived. The reason we had been apart was not simple. People like to believe there is always one reason for distance, but sometimes it is a mix of many small things. First, there was physical distance. I moved away to study, then work. At first, I visited often, but slowly, the trips became less frequent. Then there was emotional distance. Small misunderstandings grew into quiet silences. We never had one big fight, but we had many small moments where we didn't understand each other. Sometimes, pride stopped us from speaking openly. Other times, we were simply too tired from our own lives to reach out. My father was a man of few words. He showed love through actions, not sentences. I, on the other hand, wanted to talk more, to share more, but I never pushed him. Maybe I was afraid to see what was really going on inside him. Over time, we became like two people standing on opposite sides of a river, each wanting to cross, but neither building a bridge. The longer it went on, the harder it felt to start. Still, even during those silent years, I missed him. Sometimes, when I cooked a meal, I thought of the way he used to teach me small tricks in the kitchen, how to slice vegetables quickly, how to know when the rice was perfect. I missed those lessons, not just because of the skills, but because they were moments when he would sometimes smile, even if only a little. At night, I sometimes dreamed about the past, about walking beside him down the street, hearing him laugh at something I said. I would wake up with that sound still in my ears, only to realize it was just a dream. In those moments, my chest would feel heavy, like a stone was sitting inside it. I told myself I had to accept the way things were. But the truth is, I never stopped hoping for change. I wanted to see my father smile again, even if I didn't say it out loud. Paragraph 5. The decision to go see him came quickly after the phone call, but the feelings inside me were not simple. On the outside, I booked my ticket, packed my bag, and prepared for the trip. Inside, I was full of questions and memories. What if he didn't want to smile at me? What if he looked at me like a stranger? On the bus ride to my hometown, I watched the scenery pass by, trees, fields, small houses. Each one reminded me of earlier times. I thought of walking these roads with my father when I was younger. He would greet almost everyone we passed. Sometimes he would stop to help a neighbor. Those were the times when I could see him smiling naturally. I realized how much I had taken those days for granted. Now, I wondered if seeing him would feel the same, or if the years apart had changed everything. The closer I got to my hometown, the more my hands shook. My heart beat faster with every kilometer. I looked out the bus window and saw familiar buildings. The bakery where he used to buy bread. The park where we once sat on a bench and fed the birds. Each place was like a piece of a puzzle, and I was about to see if my father still fit into the picture of my life. I imagined our meeting over and over in my head. Would he smile the moment he saw me? Or would he stay silent, his face unreadable? I tried to prepare for both, but deep down, I knew I wanted only one thing, to see that smile again, real and full of warmth, not forced or polite. When I finally reached his street, I walked slowly. My bag felt heavier than it really was. My steps were unsure. The house looked the same from the outside, same paint, same garden, though the flowers were fewer now. I stood at the gate for a moment, listening to the sounds around me. Birds singing. The faint hum of a radio coming from inside the house. I took a deep breath and opened the gate. My feet carried me to the front door almost without me thinking. I knocked gently. When I finally reached his street, I walked slowly. My bag felt heavier than it really was. My steps were unsure. The house looked the same from the outside, same paint, same garden, though the flowers were fewer now. I stood at the gate for a moment, listening to the sounds around me. Birds singing. The faint hum of a radio coming from inside the house. I took a deep breath and opened the gate. My feet carried me to the front door almost without me thinking. I knocked gently. There was silence at first, then I heard slow steps. The door opened, and there he was. He looked older, of course. His hair was thinner and grayer. His shoulders seemed to carry more weight than before. But his eyes were still the same, deep, dark, and full of unspoken things. For a moment, we just stood there, looking at each other. I didn't know what to say. My throat felt tight. I wanted to hug him, but I wasn't sure if he wanted that. Finally, he stepped aside and said, "Come in." His voice was quiet, but not cold. I walked inside, my eyes moving over the familiar furniture, the old photos on the wall. Everything looked the same, but felt different, as if time had covered it all with an invisible layer. We sat down at the table. He asked if I wanted tea. I nodded, and he moved slowly to the kitchen. I watched him as he prepared it. The way he reached for the cups, the way he poured the water, it was all so familiar, yet it made me feel like a guest in my own home. He placed the cup in front of me, and for a while, we drank in silence. My heart wanted to break the quiet, to ask 100 questions, but I didn't know where to start. Then he asked, "How have you been?" It was such a simple question, but it felt heavy with years of unspoken words. I told him about my work, my small apartment, my life in the city. He listened, nodding slowly, his eyes never leaving my face that we sat down at the table. He asked if I wanted tea. When I finally reached his street, I walked slowly. My bag felt heavier than it really was. My steps were unsure. The house looked the same from the outside, same paint, same garden, though the flowers were fewer now. I stood at the gate for a moment, listening to the sounds around me. Birds singing. The faint hum of a radio coming from inside the house. I took a deep breath and opened the gate. My feet carried me to the front door almost without me thinking. I knocked gently. There was silence at first, then I heard slow steps. The door opened, and there he was. He looked older, of course. His hair was thinner and grayer. His shoulders seemed to carry more weight than before. But his eyes were still the same, deep, dark, and full of unspoken things. For a moment, we just stood there, looking at each other. I didn't know what to say. My throat felt tight. I wanted to hug him, but I wasn't sure if he wanted that. Finally, he stepped aside and said, "Come in." His voice was quiet, but not cold. I walked inside, my eyes moving over the familiar furniture, the old photos on the wall. Everything looked the same, but felt different, as if time had covered it all with an invisible layer. We sat down at the table. He asked if I wanted tea. I nodded, and he moved slowly to the kitchen. I watched him as he prepared it. The way he reached for the cups, the way he poured the water, it was all so familiar, yet it made me feel like a guest in my own home. He placed the cup in front of me, and for a while, we drank in silence. My heart wanted to break the quiet, to ask 100 questions, but I didn't know where to start. Then he asked, "How have you been?" It was such a simple question, but it felt heavy with years of unspoken words. I told him about my work, my small apartment, my life in the city. He listened, nodding slowly, his eyes never leaving my face. There was a moment when our eyes met, and I thought I saw something soften in his expression. His lips moved slightly, almost into a smile, but then it faded. I realized then how much I wanted to pull that smile out of him, as if it were a treasure hidden deep inside. We kept talking, slowly at first, then with more ease. I told him small stories from my life, ones I thought might make him laugh. He didn't laugh yet, but I saw the corners of his mouth twitch, as if the smile was getting ready to return. And in that moment, I felt hope. Maybe this visit could be the start of something new. Maybe I could see my father smile again, not today, but someday soon. And that thought was enough to keep my heart warm as the evening light filled the room. That night, I stayed in my old room. It felt strange to be there again after so many years. The bed was the same, the curtains were the same, but the air was different. It carried the weight of all the time that had passed. I lay awake, thinking about my father in the next room. I wondered if he was also lying awake, thinking about me. I remembered how, when I was small, he would check on me before going to bed. He would open the door quietly, peek inside, and smile if he saw me sleeping peacefully. That memory made my heart ache. I wanted that smile back, not just for me, but for him. Because a smile like his didn't just light up my world, it lit up his own face too. I thought about the years he had spent working hard, facing problems, carrying burdens I never fully understood. Maybe life had taught him to hide his smile as a way to protect himself. Maybe he had forgotten what it felt like to share it. I decided that I would spend this visit trying to bring it back. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know how. But I knew that love sometimes works quietly, without rules, without structure. It just needs time, patience, and presence. The next morning, I woke early and went to the kitchen. My father was already there, making tea. The sunlight was coming in through the window, and for a moment, I thought the scene looked just like it did when I was a child. I greeted him with a cheerful, "Good morning," and he nodded, handing me a cup. We didn't talk much at first, but there was something softer in the air than the day before. After breakfast, I offered to help him with some chores. At first, he refused, saying, "It's fine, I can do it." But I insisted, and soon we were working side by side, sweeping the garden, washing the car, cleaning the windows. These were simple things, but they gave us a reason to be together without the pressure of conversation. Sometimes, I caught him glancing at me, and though he didn't smile, his eyes seemed a little warmer. Later, I suggested we take a walk to the park. He hesitated, but then said, "All right." We walked slowly, side by side, our steps falling into the same rhythm. The park looked the same as I remembered, green benches, tall trees, children running around. We found a bench and sat down. I started telling him about some funny things that had happened at work. At first, he just listened, nodding now and then. But as I spoke, I noticed the corners of his mouth lifting just slightly. It wasn't a full smile, not yet, but it was closer. I kept talking, sharing more stories, hoping to keep that small change alive. He didn't laugh, but he looked more relaxed, and I realized that was progress. In the afternoon, we went through some old photo albums. At first, he seemed unsure about it, as if the memories might be too heavy. But as we turned the pages, I saw his eyes soften. We found pictures of family gatherings, trips, and birthdays. There was one picture of him holding me when I was 3, both of us laughing. He stared at it for a long time. "You were always laughing back then," he said quietly. I smiled and replied, "So were you." For a moment, our eyes met, and I thought he might smile. But instead, he looked back at the photo, his lips pressing together. Still, I felt that we were moving closer to the moment I had been waiting for. That evening, after dinner, we sat outside in the garden. The air was cool, and the sky was full of stars. We talked about small things, the weather, the neighbors, the changes in town. Then I told him about a time when I was young, and he had tried to fix my broken bicycle. I reminded him how the wheel had fallen off right after he finished, and how we had both laughed until our stomachs hurt. As I spoke, I saw a light in his eyes. His lips curved just a little. My heart jumped, but the smile faded before it could fully form. Still, I knew something important was happening. The past was no longer a closed door, we were beginning to open it together. The next day, I decided to take him to his favorite cafe. He hadn't been there in years, he said, because he was too busy. But I knew he liked the place, the smell of coffee, the quiet music, the friendly owner. When we walked in, the owner recognized him immediately and greeted him warmly. My father's face softened, and he seemed a little surprised to be remembered. We sat down, ordered tea for him and coffee for me. As we waited, I told him a funny story about my first job interview and how nervous I had been. This time, he actually let out a small laugh, not loud, but real. My heart felt warm. We were getting closer. Later that afternoon, I brought out something I had kept for years, a small wooden box he had made for me when I was a child. Inside were tiny things I had collected, a button, a marble, a piece of ribbon. He looked at the box and touched it gently. "I remember making this," he said, his voice almost a whisper. I told him how much it had meant to me, how it reminded me of the times he had been there for me, even when he didn't say much. He looked at me, and for a moment, his lips parted as if to speak, but instead, he just nodded. Yet his eyes said more than words could. On the 4th day of my visit, we went to the market together. It was busy, full of voices and colors. My father greeted a few old friends, and I saw something in him shift. His posture became straighter, his steps lighter. We stopped at a fruit stand, and the vendor made a joke about how my father used to buy twice as much fruit as he needed. This time, my father actually laughed. It wasn't a big laugh, but it was warm, and it came with the beginning of a smile. I felt a rush of joy, but I stayed calm, letting the moment be natural. That evening, we sat in the living room, drinking tea. I told him another story, this one about a cooking disaster I had recently. I exaggerated the details, making it sound even funnier than it was. At first, he just listened, but then something happened. His eyes crinkled, and his mouth opened in a real, full smile. Not a polite one, not a small curve, this was the smile I remembered from my childhood. It lit up his whole face, made his eyes shine. I almost couldn't believe it was happening. My chest felt warm, and I realized I was smiling too, without even thinking. The smile didn't last forever, it faded after a few moments, but it was enough. It was proof that the smile I loved was still there, alive under the layers of time and worry. I didn't say anything about it. I didn't want to break the magic. But inside, I felt like a door had opened. My father had let me see a part of him I thought was gone forever. And now, I wanted to help keep it alive, not by forcing it, but by being present, by sharing moments, by reminding him that there were still reasons to smile. That night, I went to bed feeling lighter than I had in years. I had seen my father smile again, and it was the most beautiful thing in the world. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. Something in me had shifted, like a heavy stone had been lifted from my heart. I kept replaying the image of my father's smile in my mind, the way his lips curved, the way his eyes lit up. It wasn't just a smile. It was like watching a flower open after a long winter. I thought about how long it had been since I'd seen it, and I realized that maybe it had never really disappeared. Maybe it had just been waiting for the right moment, the right feeling, to come back. As I sat at the kitchen table, drinking my tea, I looked at my father reading the newspaper. His face was calm, and though he wasn't smiling at that moment, I knew it was there inside him, ready to appear again. And knowing that filled me with hope, not only for him, but for our relationship. I understood now that sometimes, love isn't about big speeches or dramatic gestures. Sometimes it's about sitting quietly in the same room, sharing the same air, letting the silence feel safe instead of empty. That's what had brought us here, small steps, patient moments, and the willingness to be present. We spent the next few days in a rhythm that felt natural. We didn't talk about the years we had missed. We didn't ask why we had grown apart. Instead, we focused on the present, cooking meals together, going for walks, sharing small jokes. Each time I caught even a small smile from him, I felt a spark of joy. I realized that trying to force a big emotional conversation would have been the wrong approach. My father was not a man who opened up with words, but he could open up with actions, with the way he passed me the salt during dinner, or the way he pointed out a bird in the garden. I learned to see his love in these quiet gestures. And slowly, I saw that his smiles came more easily. They were still rare, but they no longer felt impossible. One evening, as we were sitting in the garden watching the sunset, he said something that stayed with me. "I'm glad you came." Just 4 words, but they carried so much meaning. He didn't say, "I missed you," or "I'm sorry," or "I love you." But in his way, that's what he meant. And I understood. Sometimes, love is not in the exact words you expect, but in the feeling they give you. That moment reminded me that relationships are built not only on what is said, but on what is felt and understood without being spoken. I realized that seeing his smile again wasn't just about him, it was about us finding each other again after being lost for so long. After that, I began thinking about what this experience had taught me. One lesson stood out clearly: patience. I had wanted to see my father's smile for so many years, but I had expected it to come quickly once we met again. Instead, it had taken days of small steps, of quiet moments, to get there. Another lesson was forgiveness, not in the dramatic way you see in movies, but in the simple choice to let go of old hurts and focus on now. I didn't need to know every reason for the years of distance between us. What mattered was that we were here now, together. I also learned the importance of showing up. Sometimes, just being present is the most powerful thing you can do for someone. You don't need to fix all their problems or find the perfect words. You just need to be there. I began to notice other things too. My father seemed lighter in his movements. His shoulders weren't as hunched. When he walked, there was a little more energy. I wondered if seeing me again had done this, or if it was the simple joy of having someone to share his days with. Either way, I realized that smiles are not just signs of happiness, they can also create happiness. A smile can change the way a person feels, not just the way they look. I thought about how, over the years, I had missed the chance to give him reasons to smile. But now I had the chance to change that, even in small ways. As my visit came closer to its end, I felt a mixture of emotions. I was happy we had reconnected, happy I had seen his smile again, but I was also afraid. Afraid that once I left, things would go back to how they were before. Afraid that the distance, both physical and emotional, would grow again. But then I remembered something: we had already crossed the hardest bridge. We had faced each other after years apart, and we had found warmth again. That meant the foundation was strong enough to hold us together, even if life kept us in different places. I decided that I would not let silence take over again. I would call him more often, visit when I could, and keep looking for ways to make him smile. On my last night there, we had dinner together at the small table in the kitchen. After we finished eating, I told him I would be leaving in the morning. He looked at me for a moment, then nodded. "You should come back soon," he said. And then, without warning, he smiled. It wasn't just a quick one, it stayed for a few seconds, enough for me to see the warmth in his eyes, the softness in his face. I smiled back, and for a moment, we just sat there, smiling at each other. No words, no noise, just a shared understanding that we were okay, that we had found each other again. The next morning, as I packed my bag, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Not everyone gets a chance to reconnect like this. Not everyone gets to see a lost smile return. I thought about how close I had come to never making the trip, to letting the years continue to pass in silence. If I had done that, I might never have seen that smile again. That thought made me realize how important it is to take action when your heart tells you to. We can't always wait for the right time, because sometimes, the right time is now. As I hugged my father goodbye, I held him a little longer than I had in the past. I wanted him to know, without words, that I cared, that I would be back. When I stepped out of the house and walked down the street, I turned to look at him one more time. He was standing in the doorway, watching me. And then, just before I turned the corner, he smiled again. It was a small smile, but it reached his eyes, and I carried that image with me all the way home. Now, when I think about my father's smile, I understand it differently. It's not just a shape his mouth makes. It's a sign of connection, of love, of shared history. It's proof that no matter how much time passes, no matter how far apart people drift, there's always a way back if both hearts are willing. Sometimes, a smile is not just a smile. It is a story, a memory, and a promise for tomorrow. And every time I remember it, I feel the same warmth I felt in that kitchen, on that evening when my father's smile came back to me after all those years.